Greetings, Barbara E. Ringrose. I am the co-creator of Optimize Her 2. You reached us on YouTube. You're live tonight, and this is the second and fourth Tuesdays of each month where LaQuincia Nichols and myself, my co-creator from experiencecoaching.com, and I come together and we bring authentic conversation, live conversation. And tonight we have a very special guest. All of our guests are special, but this lady is truly a very special person for all of the things she does in the community. And that is Stephanie Powers. She is the executive director of a nonprofit called CARE. It's a healing center for people in the community. And I can't wait to go into what we're going to discuss here today. Today's episode includes discussion of human trafficking. This is not for children. This live tonight is not for children. It's about sexual violence. It's about trauma. It's about educating and prevention focus, and centered on hope and healing, because a lot of people after an experience, it takes a lot of help to recover. We recognize this particular topic and the topics we'll discuss may be difficult, even for some adult listeners. And please take care of yourself as you listen, and know that resources are available. And if you know someone who needs support, please refer some of the information to them tonight. So first, I want to say welcome, ladies. Quincy, thank you so much for co-hosting with me as my co-creator here on Optimize Her 2.
Thank you, Barb, and thank you for such a thoughtful introduction. I think what I'm really most excited about for this conversation, as you share with our audience, it is a little bit different. And this is where we're going to ask for you just to listen with ears that are a bit open. Listen for someone who may not be able to hear this themselves. The theme of tonight's episode is all around recognize, respond, and restore, and really how to think about supporting in a compassionate way survivors who have been impacted through awareness and compassion. So again, this is for the broader conversation. This is how we show up and support in the community. We need the education to be able to have the awareness. And I'm so thankful that Stephanie Powers tonight of the Care Healing Center will be our guide to provide the education where we may just have some natural blind spots. Thank you for coming on the show, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me and for being open to these kind of conversations.
Yeah. I know these are the type that people sometimes shy away from, but I think that's how we get into those sticky situations. And, if you spend any time with me, I'm always talking about those tough and difficult conversations. And this is one of them, but I am excited to have you guide us through it.
So human trafficking isn't something that only happens somewhere else. And I really started, my antenna started going up a couple of years ago when I was speaking with a author in Aruba about human trafficking in the Caribbean. You always think it's somewhere else, right? But it happens right in communities just like ours, just like yours. And awareness could change or even save someone's life.
Absolutely. I think just talking about it, understanding the language of human trafficking, because I always say I've been doing this work for 20 years, and I can look back on cases that were presented to me 20 years ago. And now I can say, oh, that's absolutely human trafficking. But we just didn't have the language to describe what was happening. And we didn't have an understanding of what to do with those survivors. A lot of times it would always be kind of chalked up to, oh, is it sex work? Is it anything along those lines? But now we realize that, anytime it's exploitation, someone is being taken advantage of. And it's typically somebody who's in a vulnerable position where, traffickers are really good at reading those things about people and showing up and pretending to be, the knight in shining white armor who's going to rescue them and then puts them right back in a more dangerous situation.
Oh, wow.
That's interesting that you say that. We always think of that knight in shining white armor. I remember thinking I had one of them years ago when I met my children's father. Boy, was I wrong. But behind every statistic is a real person, isn't it, Stephanie?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the stats actually don't do any justice to survivors. Sexual violence in general is the most unreported crime. So the stats are based off of the people who have had the safety or the bravery or the support to be able to come forward, where we know that there are survivors out there who've not gotten to a place that they feel safe enough to actually disclose or to ask for help or to think that they're worthy enough to deserve safety.
And here, right in this little community of Westminster, Carroll County, Maryland, we're like in the middle of the state of Maryland. It's a rural area, so if you can picture that, we're about 35 miles outside of Baltimore City in a northwest direction. So human trafficking even is here in our local town, isn't it? It's closer than you think.
Yeah, I think one of the largest misconceptions about trafficking is that it always is going to involve, you know, crossing state borders or crossing international borders. I don't think we think of it as something that is very much happening in these rural communities. And sadly, a lot of trafficking is done by family or intimate partners. So it's a family member that's allowing a child to be sexually abused for money. It is a husband as a form of abuse or a form of power and control saying to the wife, "Oh, you have to do this to help support the family or the household."
Wow, awareness saves lives too, and the trauma that goes with that, looking for that knight in shining armor, like I had mentioned back when I was in my 20s, only to put myself in harm's way. Those are the type of things that happen to very, very good people for sure. Um, Today's goal isn't to create fear. And I am a big believer in, not to be fearful. I lived in fear years ago. These people that you get involved in, they live in fear every day. It's really for us to create awareness, Stephanie. And how are you doing that at CARE?
Sure. So the Care Healing Center has been in Carroll County, Westminster, Maryland since 1978. We are the designated sexual assault and human trafficking agency. Every state in every state and every county within each state has a designated sexual assault agency. So whether you're in Arizona or you're in Maryland, you're able to go on to your state coalition's website. Maryland, it's just the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault. I'm sure Arizona's is something very similar.
Mhm.
You can go on, put your zip code in, and it'll tell you what the local agency is that you could go to seek out support services. So we've been open since 1978. And we offer completely free and confidential services to any survivor of any form of sexual violence and their family members. So we're not just seeing what we consider primary victims, we're seeing secondary survivors as well. So if we're seeing a child who was sexually abused, we can treat the entire family because we do realize that this is it has an impact on everyone. We see college roommates sometimes who come forward because their roommate was sexually assaulted and they don't know what to do. So they come to us for help first. So we really try to treat the whole system and everyone impacted. We have a 24-hour helpline. We do walk in crisis intervention. We go to the hospital for forensic exams. We will go to the police stations with clients for reporting. We now offer legal services. So if someone's in need of a protective order or just information, we always want to let every survivor know that after a sexual assault, someone's sense of bodily autonomy has been taken away. So we never are going to say to a survivor, "Oh, you've come to us now. We have to go make a report. We have to go to the hospital. We have to do this." We always just try to arm people with what their options are and let them know that whatever choice they make in their recovery is unique to them and it's okay. And if you have people that want to go to the police and report, great. If you have people who want to come in and talk to us one time and then never speak about it ever again, that's okay too. Our door's always going to be open. And then we do offer individual and group counseling for starting at age 5 and up.
Stephanie, that's
My goodness.
really, yeah, that's really comprehensive. And I can truly appreciate everything that you all are doing to support I would say, sort of the kind of ecosystem that of support that is needed in these types of situations. What I think about though is if I am someone who's kind of just listening to this for the first time, can you give us sort of the easiest definition to understand what is trafficking? I think sometimes we hear a lot of it around it, but by definition, what is it so people can truly understand what it is and go from there?
Sure. So there are kind of two working definitions for trafficking. We have trafficking of minors and then adult trafficking. So in Maryland, human trafficking is considered anytime a child performs a sex act in exchange for a good or for money. So that is where you will see teenagers engage in what we would consider survival sex, where they will, their needs aren't being met. So they will perform a sex act in order to be taken through a drive through to get a ride somewhere. In Maryland, so it just changed. I think it was 2 years ago. Maryland used to have what we would consider child prostitution laws. And then finally, someone decided, like, oh, wait, a child cannot be a prostitute. These things don't add up.
Yeah.
So they finally just got rid of that. And they now recognize any act against a child for an exchange of good is considered human trafficking. For anyone over the age of 18, human trafficking is the use of force, fraud, or coercion to compel someone into either a sex act or into labor. So that's where you have labor trafficking as well. And the best way to describe the exploitation that occurs is they usually force would be any kind of threats of physical violence, holding someone against their will. Fraud is what we typically see with labor trafficking, where it's promises of a better future, promising of, a better career. If you stick this out and work these hours and, don't ask questions, then things will get better for you. And then coercion, which are threats of harm to family, imprisonment, those kind of things.
Well,
Yeah,
well,
you mentioned earlier that by family members, somebody the children know, somebody the abused knows, and I learned that quite a few years ago on a personal level with someone special to me. That there's a process called grooming. I did not even know what that meant until I actually heard it on Oprah Winfrey and what that process is about. So, can you talk a little bit about grooming and what somebody should be looking for in their family since it's a lot of times close to home?
Sure. And I think the other thing with that is trafficking isn't what we see on TV. Like, I think we always see those Facebook posts where someone's like, I was in Target today and someone was walking too close to my children and I alerted security. I think most traffickers now engage in what we consider like the long con. A lot of the trafficking that we are seeing is with teenagers who are being approached online. So it's like that online enticement. And they're not somebody who's like day one, like, hey, send me a nude or anything along
mhm,
those lines. They meet kids on chat rooms and in a lot of gaming software. So, like on Xbox platforms and things like that, Fortnite, Roadblocks. And they pretend to be a kid. They pretend to be just your average 13-year-old to develop that trust. And a lot of times the relationship lasts for months where it's building it up and talking to them and, getting them to think like, I'm the only person that's on your side. Traffickers target the most vulnerable. So the kids that feel like they don't belong in the world, the kids who don't have a steady home life, the kids who don't have those safe, trusted adults that they can go to. Um, we see a high occurrence in the LGBTQ community because they're feeling othered and feel like they don't have anywhere that they belong. We see it in kids who already have previous involvement with social services. So, really coming from a baseline of
mhm.
instability. And again, it's that being that knight again. I'm gonna be the one person you can trust. I'm going to make you feel safe. Um, it's getting them to feel like they have someone that they can go to. And even when they finally, start initiating kind of the ask for them to perform a sex act or to send them nude pictures or anything along those lines, it's usually under the pretense of like, hey, I'm in a situation. Can you help me out? And so it's like, oh, here's someone that loves me and cares for me. And of course, I'll do whatever it takes. And that's why so many people don't report trafficking because they have this enmeshment with the trafficker. Again, it's not like the stereotypical, like what we would see pimp prostitute, where there's like inherent abuse from the get go. It really is a crime that is built on the exploitation or taking advantage of that trust.
You spoke to me a little while ago about going to Annapolis, and you spoke about you feel like you've got a direct line going down the highway to Annapolis to speak before the sessions there when they meet. Can you explain a little bit about what you do as care and a counselor and how you interact with our state politicians with what that's like?
Sure. So part of my job is to advocate for my agency. I'm a therapist by trade. I ended up taking over as executive director 2 years ago. And it was one of those situations where I always say, if I wanted to be in charge of a nonprofit, I would have gone and gotten a master's degree in nonprofit management. It's just how my brain works. I'm very much a rule follower and very much like, oh no, this is the right way to get from point A to point B. So I really feel like taking over as executive director was a real exercise in bravery for
Hmm.
myself. Um, and as far as going down to DC or down to Annapolis to advocate for the services that we offer, it really is just an opportunity to be a voice for our survivors and for the collective good of the agency. Of this is what we're able to do, and not many places are able to provide behavioral health services free of charge. Everything comes with a cost. The way I look at it is our survivors always already paid the greatest cost, and being able to go be a voice for them and to say, like, yes, this is why we need this funding. Like, this is why this is a bipartisan issue and this impacts everyone and anyone. And it doesn't matter, your race, your ethnicity, your socioeconomic status. This is an issue that impacts everyone. So being able to go down there and, stand up and say, like, no, this is what boots on the ground looks like. It's not, you know, again, I think everyone has this picture of sexual assault as something that happens in a back alley with a stranger jumping out. And it should automatically be, typically a woman fighting for her life, scratching and clawing so she has the DNA preserved under her fingers and going immediately to the hospital for a rape kit. And then the Law and Order happy ending where, the
It's tied it through.
prosecution. Absolutely.
Right.
And I would say in the 20 years I've been doing this, I've probably had 5 clients who've had their day in court where any justice was actually served. So being able to go speak on a much broader level about what we're seeing and how this impacts so many people. I mean, I think if you polled most rooms, like everyone knows someone who has survived some form of sexual violence. And again, the statistics are always skewed because not everyone reports, but based off of what we've reported, it's like 81% of women will experience an act of sexual violence in their lifetime and 43% of men. And that's off the, National Sexual Violence Resource Center's website. So when it's that high, you're giving a voice to people. And I don't ever like to say you're giving voice to the voiceless because our survivors aren't voiceless. Our survivors are some of the strongest people I've ever met in my entire life. And I think that's what keeps me doing this because you see what happens when you tell someone, I believe you and we're going to make this better. I can't change what happened. And, it's not, I can't fast forward or rewind anything. We're going to have to get through this together. And it's not going to be a pretty process and it's not going to be an easy process, but it's definitely something where good can come out of it.
Yeah. When you talk about the statistics that you share, and as you were talking about sort of this, and it's horrible to say this, but this best case, worst case scenario, right? That she has the DNA under the nails. You get to the doctor, like you would hope all those things happen, but I think, realistically, that's not right. That's not the case. So when you think about it, if someone suspects that trafficking or some other form of exploitation is happening, how should we respond to support those around us?
So I think always being an upstander instead of a bystander. I'm a huge believer in you see something, say something. So, and again, that's always an awkward situation because we don't want to necessarily feel like we're reading in a situation wrong or we're making assumptions. But just letting people know, like, hey, there's always going to be a local agency. So if it's giving someone a phone number saying like, hey, I think you could benefit from talking to these people. If you see someone being mistreated, uh, if you see certain signs in children. So the things that we always tell parents to look for, you know, if they're spending all their time online, all their friends are online, if they all of a sudden start withdrawing, If all of a sudden they have a lot of money that they didn't have before, or two cell phones, or new clothing, those kind of things. Those are always kind of like the red flags.
Mhm.
If for people who are a little bit older, it's that idea if they don't have their own documents. We had a nurse practitioner from a CVS Minute Clinic call us once because she had a young lady who came in for a wellness check. And she didn't know her address. She didn't know where she was living. The gentleman who brought her in for this visit had all of her documents. So those kind of things. And it's being aware in so many different settings. So, medical settings is one that we see all the time. So, we always train the hospital on what to look for. It used to be that we'd pay attention to like tattoos and branding, but then traffickers realized that we got hip to that. And so, it's always evolving. And I always feel like we are one step behind because they realize what doesn't work. And so, they're able to, you know, reacclimate and find new tactics, which is scary because especially for parents, like we never know. Kids are way smarter with us than us when it comes to technology anyway. I mean, I
Sure.
have 3 kids
Right.
and my oldest is 16 and I feel like I'm always like, "Wait, what?" And like
Right.
we
Yeah.
always tell the story that there was a TikTok trend, and I'm not on TikTok and I don't know how TikTok really works, but there was a TikTok trend where there was this gentleman that all the kids changed their profile picture to it was like this older white man who was just they were trying to do it to like make fun of him and like but it came up on my son's phone that he was chatting with this older white man and some of their conversation was a lot of like going back about fantasy football and using some inappropriate language and all I saw was this older white man's profile talking to my teenage son, and I immediately lost. I was like, "No, no more apps and everything." And he's like,
Mhm.
"Mom, it's just Aiden." And I was like, "What?" Like, first of all, why is he not using his name? Why? And then why is he using? And like, my son had to show me like the receipt says the kids call it. I
Yes.
was like, "No, mom, this is a TikTok trend where everybody's doing it to put this guy on blast." And I was like, "Oh, I'm so not cool." So,
Mhm.
again, like that's what's really hard about being a parent is kids think they know best and they think that they know what the reality of the world is. And parents, when we try to kind of set these boundaries and these limits, we're just not cool and we don't understand what they're going through. And we're like, "Yeah, I understand what you're going through because when I was a kid, we didn't have cell phones, so we were just out doing bad stuff anyway."
They
Right,
So,
were
right.
busy playing outside. Many people wonder, like on the adult side, we went visited the children's side there for a few minutes, but many people don't understand on the adult side why they don't leave or why they don't ask for help. Can you help us better understand the barriers that these survivors often face and go through, Stephanie?
sure. So I think most of the time it comes down to the three emotions of fear, shame, and guilt. Fear that they're not going to be able to get out of the situation safely, or that the trafficker is holding something over their family, or just their general well being and safety. Then the shame of, I can't believe I've allowed this to happen to me. The difference between shame and embarrassment is shame is when we internalize those to say, "I'm bad, I'm dirty, I'm never going to get over this, I'm broken, no one's ever going to love me." And we internalize those feelings. And then the guilt of, again, we live in a society that tells, especially women, like, you should know how not to be sexually abused. You should know how not to be trafficked. And if you fall for it, it's your fault and
Yeah.
you should have known better. So really helping people understand that anyone can end up in a situation when they're being exploited. We see all the times online advertisements for scams that are going around of how people are getting a phone call saying that their loved one is in danger and they need to go to the closest CVS or Rite Aid and get all these gift cards and send them. And when we think about it, we're like, well, duh, that is not what's going to happen. But when you're in a moment where you're feeling vulnerable and overwhelmed and somebody's telling you that your loved one's in danger, and now with AI there's so much like spoofing their voices and things like that, so it's like really like somebody being like, "Grandma, I need help." Grandma of course is going to go get those gift
Right.
cards. So it's really normalizing it that yes, these are things that people are going through and people feel shameful, or if it is something where they really are being exploited, that you know their legal status, if it is someone who is here illegally, that it's that they're going to be unsafe or they are undocumented, and they think that it's if they go get help that they're automatically going to be deported, which is not the case. In the United States, we have protections for people who have been victims. You would think a lot of people would think that then, oh, well, everybody's going to do that to be able to seek out citizenship, but that's not the case whatsoever. And that's a common misconception that people would use a U visa to
Mm.
stay. But again, when you're dealing with a real survivor, you're having people who experience that shame and that guilt, and that they actually don't want help and they don't want services because they feel so bad about what happened to them and feeling like, oh, well, I have to, just kind of bear this cross on my own.
So, in the state of Maryland and maybe the adjacent states, or maybe on a national level, what you see, would you say that there's certain victims they're targeting? Could you give statistics? You mentioned about 81% of women have been assaulted or affected in some way, shape, or form. Or especially with a lot of people coming into our country, would you say certain groups are targeted, or genders, male, female, for instance, being targeted, or age groups being targeted? And are you mentioned about the criminal? It seems like the victim then becomes the criminal in some of this, where it seems to get reversed, which is an interesting phenomenon. But would you say there's an increase and it's because of anything in particular based on your experience?
Sure. So we know one of the most targeted populations are runaways. So runaway youth. It's like a crazy statistic that like 1 in 3 children who run away from home will be approached by a trafficker within 48 hours of running away. Which I'm like, wait, like, are they all going to the same spot? How does this happen?
Really?
And it is because of the online engagement and just being again, traffickers, they know how to seek out the people who are the most vulnerable and the most isolated. We are primed, like, biologically primed to seek out connection and want to have a sense of belonging in this world. And when you have teenagers or young adults, so when we talk about trafficking, like, we consider children to go up to 24, just because of brain development and just
Good
some of the
point.
things that kids are seeing. It really is those kids that feel like they don't have a place where they belong in the world. And again, the traffickers, like, I'm gonna even for labor trafficking. I know it became really big after Hurricane Katrina. There was an influx coming out of Louisiana where it was, and we still see it now, where it's labor trafficking, but it's kids who are selling magazines or knives and things like that, where they kind of come into a community and they're always in like this big van and the kids are going knocking door to door, and it's like, well, I have to hit my quota to be able to be fed. And again, when they were initially approached, it's this idea of like, yeah, you get to be your own boss, you're going to be out on the street, you get to go, you're in control of what you make. And then it's like, well, no, there's actually a lot of strings attached.
Mhm.
Um and I remember one time, and again, this was probably 20 years ago now. Um and this kid came to my door and he was selling cleaning supplies, and I had just gone through a human trafficking training, and I was like, when was the last time you had a meal? Like, and he was like, I'm just trying to sell cleaning supplies. I was like, no, like, come in my house. I don't want to buy your supplies, but I like, let me give you some food. Let me like, and he was like so surprised. And I was like, I had a card because the Polaris Project, which is out of DC, is who did the training that I went to forever ago. I was like, you need to call them because they will help you get out of this situation and get you back on your feet. Um, and it's a lot of times people don't even realize what they're going through is being trafficked. Again, they think that they entered this and that they should know better and they can get themselves out of it.
And I can only imagine that it's even harder when you have that next experience, right? So you've been out there trying to do whatever the person who has put you in the situation is asking you to do. And then even the additional layer of possible shame of having to go back and say, hey, this is what I was doing on the street. So it's beyond that this happened, but here's also what I was doing trying to survive during that period. It's so layered and multifaceted. I am so thankful that there are people like you who are out here doing this type of work.
Takes a special person, that's for sure,
Hmm.
Stephanie. I would totally agree with Quincy's comment there. You often talk about the trauma informed care. So, what does that mean, and why is it so important as you are helping those survivors?
Sure. So, trauma informed care is the idea that whatever field we're in, whether we are a receptionist at a dental practice or we are a therapist, that from the moment we make contact with a person, we recognize that that person might be having the worst day of their lives and that we have to be warm and welcoming and allow them to go at their own pace. So, at my agency, we do a lot of trainings for different agencies, like we've done it before for physical therapy practices, for the health department, where it's that idea that the moment that somebody's walking in, we don't know everything that they've gone through in their lifetime. And for somebody to go to a dentist's office or to a physical therapist can be a major act of bravery based off of what their past experiences have been. So, being trauma informed is recognizing that it is our duty to treat everyone with respect and dignity. And again, like I've had this experience so many times when you go, I always say it's whenever you get blood drawn. You go in and the receptionist acts like, you're imposing on her for coming
Yes.
for your appointment. And it's just that idea of, just being gentle with other people. And then when you get into more detailed practices, um, you know, I I shared this story because it was like mind blowing to me. I had to switch gynecologists recently, and I have a younger gynecologist. My old one had retired and had been practicing for years and was wonderful in her own way. But it was the first time that I ever went into a doctor's appointment where before I even was asked to change into a gown, I met her in her office and talked to her for an entire hour before my actual visit. And then when she went to go do perform the exam, she had another nurse in the office with her, and she
Sure.
said, "Okay, I'm gonna touch your knee right now." And then she walked through the entire process, and my mind was blown. And I said to her, "Can I just tell you, like, I work for a sexual assault agency, and this is the first time in, the 30 years that I've seen a doctor that they have ever actually been trauma informed." And she was like, "Oh, really?" And I was like, "Yeah." She explained everything. She talked about the reasons. She gave me options. Like, it was like so mind boggling. And I've referred so many people to her because it was just such a breath of fresh air. Because I think, especially in the medical field, there's this idea that the doctor is the expert, and
Right.
if you question them, if you ask for referrals, you're going against medical advice, you're not taking what you're being prescribed, and it's immediately that you were wrong.
Mm.
And I think we really being trauma informed is that idea of really welcoming people into the space as being an active participant in their treatment, in just like getting to know their life before we make any recommendations, or we really, take the opportunity to say, like, tell me about your past experiences, and not immediately following up with, like, oh, well, now we have to report this, or I don't know what to
Right.
do with you, or you're too complicated, and really letting people know that they have value and worth.
It's interesting that you talk about that. An example would be when I came back from Heathrow Airport, and there was a man and a woman, and they had two very small children, with one screaming and all of the things. But everybody else had like all kinds of different type luggage. Their luggage seemed to be a little different. And security really took their time with them. And I thought to myself, even though I was worried I was going to get delayed for my flight, I was concerned and I was happy at the same time about what these people were doing with those children, and also happy that security at Heathrow was going through such great lengths with these children. It's a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I even think about while you were sharing the story of just the doctor's office visit, number one, having the space to be able to actually sort of talk to the person who's going to examine you before, you're kind of giving them the business, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's such you would think it would be a part of the experience, but oftentimes it's not. And some of the reason why I really centered the work that I do around being able to speak up in those sort of tense and tough situations is because I had come across a statistic that's shared. Roughly 70% of nurses are unwilling or feel hesitant to challenge a doctor, even if they see them giving an improper diagnosis or maybe prescribing the wrong type of care or medicine. And I was just like, if the people who are supposed to be our support system in the room also don't have these skills or unwilling to speak up, then how does that even help the person who, if I'm just the patient, I'm trusting the nurse. There's so many people I'm thinking who are listening that are going to speak up. And if everyone's unwilling to do so, it's just a scary situation. I think it's a part of our entire community to really think about how do we become a part of prevention. So when you think about your families, your businesses, the schools, what can we do to be, I would say, an ally and a support in terms of prevention?
Yeah. So I think exactly what you both said. Like when you see something, you say something. If always trust your gut. I think as women, especially when we have this intuition, and so often we say things like, oh, well, I don't want to be rude. And it's like,
Hmm.
no, be rude, be rude, be the disruptor in the room. And that's okay. Um, but really paying attention, especially like teachers, I think are incredible. Like they see so much in children's lives. And if they see something that doesn't sit well with them, we can report anonymously, like, so especially with human trafficking. The National Center for Missing Exploited Children has a tip line. The human trafficking text line, which is you can just text "be free." I don't know what for people who know the letters on their phone. But Be Free is a national tip line for human trafficking as well. Um, and just again, you're more than welcome to call agencies like mine and just say, you know what, I saw this. It really made me uncomfortable. What can I do to make the situation better? And just letting people know, like, there are places out here that really care and really want to help and make a difference. So speaking up about those things, a lot of times will always after a sexual assault or a trafficking incident comes to light, everyone's like, "Oh, well, we knew he was the creepy teacher." And it's like, "Well, why are we not doing anything about the creepy teacher?" Or like, what steps are being taken to make sure that the creepy teacher is not able to continue as just being the creepy teacher? So really finding that power and that voice by talking to other people.
So we've learned about the Care Healing Center right here. There's healing centers like this in all the different states. Um, the services and support that are available for both survivors and the families, because a lot continues in that healing process much longer and could go on for a long period of time after the event took place. After working with all of these survivors for 20 years, what gives you hope, Stephanie?
Well, definitely not the news. I feel like,
Every
um,
day.
Yeah, but I think that's a thing. I always try to focus on the micro changes I'm able to make than the macro systems, because if I think of all the things that are wrong in the world, like I will just beat my head up against the wall because, yeah, feeling like you've been doing this for such a long time and feeling not much changes and that we don't see survivors or treat survivors the way that we should. But when you sit with someone, whether it is during a forensic exam or if they're calling on the helpline or they're coming in for therapy after, they're in their 60s and this happened when they were a child. But just being that light for somebody to let them know, again, I believe you. I'm not going to ask you for evidence. I'm not going to ask you to detail every incident of your assault. Most of the time, I had clients that I saw for therapy for years that I never really knew exactly what happened to them. And it's because we don't need to know the details to be able to affirm with someone that it should never have happened, that they deserve to feel safe. And when you sit with somebody through some of their darkest times and let them know, like, there still can be good in the world. Like, that is what keeps you in it, knowing that there are these little moments that, especially my favorite population to work with are adults who were molested as children. And it's because when a child is sexually abused, that child views that assault or that prolonged abuse and always views it from that child eyes of, I did something wrong, something happened. And when you process that with an adult and they have that aha moment of, oh, wait, I was the child in the room. I should have been safe. I should have been protected. And they have that spark moment where they realize that it's not their fault. And especially for situations where they were abused by a family member, when they realize, like, that was that person's job to protect me, and they're the one that failed. I didn't fail this. Um, those are the moments that keep you going in this. So like, okay, like I am making a difference, and that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that, there is beauty and grace in healing. And that I always use the example of like, it's like a mosaic. Yes, your whole life has been shattered and blown up, and it doesn't matter how hard we try to put it back, it's never gonna look the way it did, but we can turn it into something beautiful.
Mm, that's powerful. I would love to ask this question of you, Stephanie. Um, if every listener could remember just one thing from today's conversation, what would you want for that to be?
That when someone comes forward and says, especially a child, um, and they say that something has happened to them, believe them. People don't make this up. I know there's this weird belief that women make up these stories to be vindictive or to ruin a man's life. And again, I'm using women, and that is not to say that men are not victims, but there's this belief that survivors come forward to destroy somebody else's life or to ruin something. And when you see what a survivor has to go through, there's no reason that anybody would come forward, go through an invasive 8-hour forensic exam just to get revenge on someone. That is not what this looks like. And again, we always focus on forgiveness. And it's this idea of like, no, we're not forgiving the perpetrator. You're forgiving yourself, because all the blame always falls onto the survivor. They always feel like they shoulda, coulda, woulda. I should have done this different. I could have gone here. I didn't do this. I made a bad choice that ended up in the worst experience of my life. And when you give that person that permission to forgive themselves, that, I mean, I think in that in itself gives people that hope that things can get better. So believe people. Let people be aware of what services are available in your community, even if it's the national. So RAINN, RAINN, is like the national network for rape, abuse, incest national network. Um, they have a chat line, they have a 24-hour helpline, letting people know that they don't have to be alone. They don't have to report, they don't have to call the police, we don't have to do anything, but just know that you don't have to go through this alone.
Thank you.
Stephanie, you beam compassion. It radiates from your tone, your voice, the way you're sharing these experiences. Your heart's in it with us today here at Optimize Her too. Conversations like this, as Quincy said, they're not always easy, and awareness is the beginning of for all of us. Asking the questions, being compassionate, for us to then develop an understanding of what's going on and then how we can get involved, because that understanding then leads to action, and taking that action to help another human being, taking the action for yourself to protect your lives, and also to end up embracing the healing process, which, like you said, you may not be the same. You may be a little bit broken after something like that enters your world. But at Optimize Her too, our mission is all about educating, elevating, and empowering mainly women, but I can tell you this conversation has been around children, it's been around men. We know men are exploited not as much as women from based on your statistics earlier. But yeah, all of us have some sort of opportunity in life where something horrible or occasion where trauma enters our world. And I think it's important that we continue the dialogue, continue the conversation, much like you keep continuing your visits down to Annapolis and DC to make people aware and fight for these people that a lot of us will never know unless it happens to someone around us. That's for sure.
I would say I had to just have a deep breath for this entire conversation. I think it's
I
been,
know. I feel it in my chest.
yeah, just to let it breathe
I
for a
feel it,
moment.
physically in my
Mhm.
chest.
Because
Yes.
it's a real topic. And I think, if today's conversation moved you, you don't have to let it in here. Like Barb said, continue learning, continue sharing, share what you've learned with someone that you trust here. And remember, sometimes simply recognizing the signs and knowing where to turn can make all the difference. And I will say that if all you get from this first video is knowing that you have a contact in Stephanie, she will get you pointed in the right direction. Stephanie, how can they reach out to you?
We'll post some information on this YouTube channel about this.
Excellent.
That's for sure. Ladies, always a pleasure. Stephanie Powers at Care Healing Center, and hopefully that will come back again, meet you again at another time, Stephanie, so we can talk more about this. And we thank all of our listeners here and viewers on Optimize Her Too. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us your insight, your expertise, Stephanie. Quincy, always a joy to have you as co-host here on Optimize Her Too. Thank you,
My
ladies.
pleasure. Have a wonderful
Thank
night.
you. You
All
too.
right. Stay well.